Good afternoon. This is Ifan from the Strategic Day Trader, and this is the market wrap for February 5th, 2019. Qs up almost 1%, 0.96 at the moment. Got about 32 minutes left, and just short of 0.5% so far on the SPY. SPY is yet to make a new high, right? But it is back up at the highs. So the bullishness remains. Now you may be looking at the description of the video and noticing that it's the exact same as yesterday because we are essentially doing the same thing that we have been doing for the last few days, which is following the hourly uptrend. Here is a pivot. We're still above the 20 MA. Hourly pivot still there. Hourly pivot on the Qs formed coming out of lunch, and now we're back at the highs. So a break of this, we can shift out of the bullish bias. Okay, so for now, 169.97 on the Qs, and it's going to be 271.88 on the SPY. Okay, then we'll shift to neutral. I don't think it's a good time to be chasing up here, to be going after the market into resistance. Okay, we're into this bit of a pivot here. You can see the 200 is right there, okay, on the SPY and the Qs. Okay, now the 200 is not necessarily a special line on the chart. It's a decent average for price over the last year or so. A little bit quicker moving than a year price because it's 200. We have about 250 trading days in a year. Okay, but the Qs especially are into this resistance here where this pivot formed, right? And then that was the bit of equal highs there that we got before the market came in. Okay, we could get above it and continue to move higher. And that's kind of where we're sitting at, waiting to see if that what happens. So we'll remain bullish until this hourly pivot gets taken out. Okay, pretty straightforward. All right, so hourly uptrend is still intact, so we haven't really had much reason to change that. Okay, so there was potential that we got this breakout failure here. It was a breakout no follow through, but you can see the base held. We never came even close to breaking the base and went back up, at least on the Qs, for new highs. Okay, so it didn't end up turning into a breakout failure there. Okay, so if there, we outlined yesterday what it could look like, couple scenarios where the bullishness would end, but so far the bullishness remains, and neither of those scenarios happened. Okay, all right, so on to some of the plays from today. If you got a chance to catch the glue at the morning, it was just a very quick 1 minute high-low here. Sammy did call it out. This was just a 15-cent stop there. Oh, I gave it a little bit extra. 9 by 9.13, right? And then if you were able to get filled, it was a quick play there. There was a sell setup here. The sell setup didn't end up panning out though, so this sell setup didn't work here. And I know that the room has a play on it still that triggered underneath 890 there. So still looking for this to move lower. Thought it was a good gap, good amount of shock value. Location was decent enough too, so I thought this was a pretty good gap on the GLUU. Okay, it just stayed pretty strong this morning. It was kind of surprising. I guess the market was pretty strong. That tends to happen more often, that gap downs get bought in a bullish market. AMRS had this as the #1 gap up, just didn't find a way in. So you could have played perhaps one of these pivots here as a way in. Even a break of the highs would have given you some. This was a bit wild, the AMRS, so I wanted as perfect of an entry as I could get. I couldn't really find one that suit me, so I just kind of let that one go. Pretty good gap though. Ending the downtrend here on this gap, similar to what we did on the ZYNE, ending the downtrend there. So that kind of gap I do like. I just could not find a way in, and it was also quite the mover. All right, so those were a couple of the big ones. The WDR, probably the most heartbreaking of the plays today. Was ready to call and play this. But when I looked at it on the 1 minute, I noticed that it might not have actually been open. So this is so you can see here, I wasn't really sure, does this really count as a gap up? If these two don't count, then it wasn't really gapping up. And the reason that's important is because, and if based on this daily chart, this is what we call a gap berry, which means it gaps up, clears resistance, and then sells off and breaks support. I left 2 links in the description that are called Gap Bully, Gap Berry Part 1 and Gap Bully, Gap Berry Part 2. Number 1 outlines the criteria for the strategy, when the strategy is in play, and the entry and the stop, okay? What my preferred entry pattern is, okay? And then the second one are the amplifiers, what separates some Gap Bullies and Gap Berries from lower quality ones, the good ones from the lower quality ones, okay? So this, if you want, as just a fun exercise, go and check out the second video with the amplifiers and see how many of the amplifiers that this one satisfies. Okay, if you're not familiar with the strategy, that's what the first video link is for, so you can get a feel for how to recognize them and what kind of entries I'm looking for. Okay, and just a hint, if you're going to do the exercise, I was ready to call this, so that may give you some clue as to how many of the amplifiers were present as this was triggering here. Okay, and then if you want to see kind of what the gap bully looks like, that would be a gap berry because it buried the gap. This is a gap bully. Okay, and you can do the same thing. This is LRN. See how many of the amplifiers that this satisfies. Okay, and whether or not this was considered a high quality one. Okay, so but I'll go over the numbers here on the WDR. There were 2 entries here. One was a little bit more secure than the other. The first one being of this 5-minute sell setup under 1711 by 1723, and the next one has a secondary entry underneath these tails here. Okay, that was the one that I was looking to call. That was under 1694. Same stop though. Still has to go up here because we don't have a good kind of secure place, other place to put the stop. You could put over one of these highs of these bars, but it's not going to be very secure. This is the pivot, so that's where it should go. Okay, so that was the WDR. Got to target right in that first bar. So yeah, I just held off on it because I just wasn't sure if this really can be considered a gap up. And what I like about the gap berries is that I want to see evidence that people either thought that they were long, that they had a nice profit and that profit disappeared, or that someone thought, I'm going to play long on this gap up, it's good news, whatever, and then immediately had that turn into a negative position. So I wanted to see evidence of that right at the open, and I just wasn't sure if these 2 dots, you know, not even candles, really were counted, or if it didn't open till here, and if it didn't open till here, then it wasn't really a gap berry, which this is still okay. It's still the same entry pattern, still a sell setup entry on something that was relative weak to the market, but that it just didn't really give me, at least at the open, enough evidence that this was actually a gap up. And then I looked at the pre-market too. That didn't help either. So yeah, I was really close on that one, but might as well not even been aware of it because we didn't play it, and so that's okay. That happens. But I think if you were to go and look at this as your standard gap berry and look at the amplifiers, I think you can see why it was a big focus there on the WDR. Okay. So yeah, not a lot I thought today. You know, some of the movers I thought weren't easy to find a way into. WDR only had that 1 entry. And then the glue. Again, yeah, I mean, there was an entry finally here in the afternoon. That seems to be that's working out well for Sammy's call there. But besides that 1 minute breakdown, there weren't a lot of other opportunities to short this. that would have worked out well. I guess finally this CBT is doing a sell setup here. This one I've been watching all day as well. I like the gap down on the CBT, breaking the uptrend there. But it's also a little bit on the spready side. So just seeing that now on my charts. There's really nothing else to look at. So we still have plenty of earnings seasons left in the week. So if you're still trying to make something out of the week, I think it's not a bad time to really focus in for these next few days. Okay, but hopefully you're doing pretty well in catching some of these plays. All right. So we'll see what the market brings us tomorrow. All right. And I will talk to you then. All right. Have a great evening.